Fallout is, bar none, my favorite game series of all time. It is also the one closest to my heart. I've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in the wasteland over the last decade exploring, making friends, creating enemies, and spamming stim packs while I run backwards slowly, shooting wildly into the air. Fallout has this emotional connection for me, and it also really saved me from myself during a low point in my life, but that is a story for another time. You're here because you're looking to learn a little bit more about Bethesda's acclaimed RPG series, so just think of me as your trusty Vault-Tec guide, maybe. Whether you're here because you're excited for Starfield, or you're tired of replaying Skyrim, or you want to get ready for that Amazon Prime TV show, I've got you covered. Fallout as a series is hard to condense into a single logline because it constantly has reinvented itself over the last 3 decades. This post-apocalyptic RPG series sees the player take control of a traveler in the American wasteland in an alternate history where the transistor, which is a computer component, was never invented. Without digital technology, our nation's innovations are driven by atomic sciences, leading to everything from nuclear-powered cars to nuclear-powered microwaves in every American home. The United States grows into this atom punk thing, complete with the Disney Tomorrowland aesthetics, the 50s trilby hats, the rockabilly fashion. But in the year 2077, deep into the resource wars, a series of nukes are dropped on the United States and decimate the country, leaving only a fraction of the population behind. Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game, hereafter just Fallout 1, is still one of the more smartly written and delicately crafted CRPGs out there. It's also very much a product of its time. It was created by Tim Kaine and developed at Interplay Studios, and was an attempt to create this vast, morally ambiguous RPG that drove the player through a post-apocalyptic America and gave them the power to be a savior or a monster. 4 years later, 30 employees and a whopping $3 million, which are all metrics which were virtually unheard of in game development back in the 90s. Voila, we've got Fallout. So, players come in and create a character, set up their stat builds, and venture forth into the wasteland. Well, as soon. You're gonna have to fight a few dozen rats first. It's gonna take an hour or so, but then freedom. The first 2 Fallout games are isometric turn-based RPGs that take place over an open series of connected maps that span across a few cities, some points of interest, and plenty of people to meet. See, the core of Fallout is in its characters, and it has been from day one. In this, Fallout 1 still excels. The intricate dialogue trees, multiple solutions to quests based on your build, and thorough relationship webs are all still really admirable. The Master is a fantastic villain. The art and iconography is beautiful, and it's funny as hell. For me, what kills Fallout 1 is the pacing. Fights are very, very, very slow, and they don't involve much animation to spice them up. Most of your attacks are going to miss, and then most of the opponent's attacks are going to miss, and we're all going to spend a lot of time clicking the same button over and over again. Moving across the map is slow, collecting items and progressing the story is slow, the UI and the menus are ugly, and it's a pain to navigate. For me, as a CRPG noob, Fallout 1 just doesn't really hit, despite my many, many attempts to get into it. However, this game is still fantastic, especially if you're somebody who has gotten into other newer CRPGs, things like Pillars of Eternity or obviously the gigantic Baldur's Gate 3. I think that you should take a look at Fallout 1. A lot of it has stood the test of time, and again, really the only thing that holds it back for me is the pacing, but we'll move on. Now it's 1998. Let's look at Fallout 2. Just a year later, Interplay's Black Isle Studios, who would later go on to develop CRPG masterpieces like Planescape Torment and Icewind Dale, would release a sequel to their critically acclaimed hit. Though this was not the same team at Interplay who developed Fallout 1, their sequel reached critical acclaim, with many, including myself, seeing it as superior to Fallout 1 in nearly every way. This time, however, the sales did not come in. Just 2 weeks after Fallout 2's release, Interplay filed for bankruptcy. They spent the next decade in financial limbo on the brink of collapse, until they had to sell the Fallout license to a man who had been after it since day one, Todd Howard. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Fallout 2 is basically an improved version of the first title in the franchise. Same engine, same graphics, same basic mechanics. The story in this game is much more interesting, however, asking the player to track down a mythical device called the Garden of Eden Creation Kit, the GECK, the last hope for humanity in 2241. Supposedly, the GECK can create water and thus life out of thin air, and every Wastelander and their mother will do anything in their power to get it. Fallout 2 has a much quicker start than Fallout 1, although it is still kinda slow by modern standards, but it introduces you to a host of characters and locations pretty early on to keep you hooked. Animations are a little bit better, colors are a little brighter, menus are a little less ugly, and it's not so damn confusing right out the gate. Fallout 2 did manage to get its claws into me the way that Fallout 1 never did, though I'm sure you will find just as many fans out there who say the opposite. While it is still slow-paced, if you're patient, you will be rewarded with a great world to explore. The year is 1997. A junior developer at Bethesda Game Studios has finished his first run through Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game, and had a thought. What if this was an action game? A fully realized RPG, but an action game. Just think! This junior developer was, of course, Todd Howard.
I was the kid. I was writing games when I was, 12, whatever, and the other kids in the block would say, I'm going to play quarterback for the Cowboys, and I'd be like, I'm going to make video games, and everyone's going to play them. Like, you dork. Go back to the chess club. Who's laughing now? Yes, I was in the chess club.
Who appealed to the directors at Bethesda soon after the release of Fallout 1 and begged them to get the license for him based on his pretty much unheard of vision for it. The studio executives smiled, nodded politely, and ushered him out of the room. 9 years have passed. Todd Howard is now the creative director of Bethesda after his massively successful directorial debut with The Elder Scrolls III: Morrowind. He finds a sticky note on his desk that reads, "We got Fallout for you," with a small smiley face. It is time. This real series of events led to one of the biggest franchises in gaming, and it really could not have happened had Todd Howard not been so irrationally persistent about transforming his favorite game ever made into something completely different. Gone are the isometric camera, the 2D sprites, the turn-based combat. Fallout is under new management. In 2008, Bethesda Game Studios revived the still beloved but nearly forgotten RPG franchise as one of the most massive hits in gaming history. Fallout 3 is a first-person shooter, but combat doesn't jump all the way from turn-based to live. Fallout 3 has a real-time with pause system called VATS, which freezes time during combat and lets the player scan and select different body parts of enemies to try and shoot, accompanied by the percentage chance you will actually hit. You'll make your selections with a limited number of action points, just as in the classic Fallout games, and then let it rip. VATS is one of the most insane ideas for a first-person shooter ever conceived, but guess what? It just works. Fallout 3 is still a hardcore RPG through and through, but the seamless transition to an open-world action game is still impressive. It defined the open-world genre so dramatically that games are still aping it to this day. Fallout 3 gives you control over the lone wanderer, who escapes from life in Vault 101 at the age of 19 to find her missing father in a wasteland she knows literally nothing about. It's the perfect introduction to the world, as you learn alongside your character that every corner you turn might be your last. More than anything, though, this game lets you explore. You can go far and wide, or you can stay on the straight and narrow, care about the story, or don't. It matters exactly as much as you want it to. Find the people, go to the places, shoot the stuff. Don't find the people, don't go to the places, don't shoot the stuff. It doesn't matter. Just go. Any direction you please, actually. Plus, Liam Neeson is your dad, so... And Enon Zur's soundtrack, including the premiere of the iconic Fallout theme, is nothing short of an all-time great. Nestled comfortably in this series' complicated release history is 2010's Fallout New Vegas. Following the success of Fallout 3, Bethesda rented out the Fallout IP to a new studio called Obsidian Entertainment, which was, oh wow, made up of the very Black Isle Studios employees that had created Fallout 2 in the first place. Bethesda handed Obsidian the Gamebryo engine and put them to work, and so it was that the planets aligned. All the intelligence, writing mastery, and story dynamics of the classic Fallout games met the quality of life upgrades, visuals, and modability of the Bethesda version. It would be impossible to hide my bias here, so I will come out and say it. Fallout New Vegas is quite possibly my favorite video game ever made, so you should try it. Just a suggestion. Fallout New Vegas gives players control of the Courier, a mailman who took a last-minute job delivering something called the Platinum Chip, and who paid dearly for it. On your way to take the chip to Mr. House, the mysterious owner of New Vegas, you're ambushed by a gangster named Benny, voiced by Matthew Perry, and left for dead in the desert. Could I be any more of a bad guy? After being rescued and patched up by the good people of Good Springs, you're given complete and total freedom to roam the Mojave Wasteland and find out what the Platinum Chip is, and why Benny was willing to kill you for it. And maybe get some revenge while you're at it. Who knows? It is almost impossible to understand the moving pieces of this world as they change around you in response to your decisions. Shooting one person at the wrong time could have ramifications that reach across the desert and through to the end of the game. Dialogue choices become available to different players depending on how they've statted their character and the decisions they've made previously, so it's unlikely any two people have played New Vegas exactly the same way. Dialogue is also more clever than it has any right to be all the way through to the end of the game, and your dialogue choices can have very immediate ramifications if you say the wrong thing. A pleasant chat can become a shootout in a matter of seconds, but hey, that's the wasteland, baby. There are many action RPGs in which players will try to power through the dialogue sections to reach the action. However, players will likely find the reverse true in New Vegas. Utilizing the correct weapons, armor, chems, and skills will give you the edge in individual fights, but the overall war is going to be determined by how well you can play your character, whether you're doing a max strength barbarian or a lucky son of a bitch. An endless cast of fascinating characters with overwritten backstories will carry the courier through the wastes in search of the truth, and land them in a very specific position to determine how the war plays out. Although the player is always in control, most repercussions of your actions are completely unintended and leave you scrambling to figure out how to repair an alliance or take a stronghold to remedy it. Obsidian has created the most intricately crafted game I have ever played, with excellent DLC and well over 100 hours of content, and that's not even touching on mods. Side with the New California Republic, maybe Caesar's Legion, or Mr. House, or maybe no one at all. The fate of Hoover Dam is in your hands. Bethesda Game Studios was riding an all-time high following the release of Skyrim in 2011. Looking to take Fallout to the next generation in the same way they'd done for the Elder Scrolls, Todd Howard and his team got to work in secret. Fallout 4 is one of the more impressive game development stories out there because even with 500 developers, hundreds of millions of dollars, and a 5-year development cycle, they managed to keep the entire thing 100% secret until late 2014. Todd Howard took to the stage at E3 2015, walked audiences through a deep dive of the first next-gen RPG, and ended it with, "And it's out in 3 months." The hype for Fallout 4 was pretty unmatched in those months. To this day, very few games have managed to recreate it. Fallout 4 launched that November to universal critical acclaim, generally positive reviews from fans, and sales that outdid the original release of Skyrim. In Fallout 4, players take control of the sole survivor. After creating your character in 2077 pre-war Boston, you, your spouse, and your child evacuate to a nearby vault when a nuclear bomb is dropped on the city. Tricked into a cryo-freeze, your baby is whisked away by kidnappers who kill your spouse while looking you dead in the eye. After being unfrozen, the sole survivor steps into 2287 Boston, now known as the Commonwealth, and begins an expansive chase across the American Northeast to find their son. Meanwhile, the mysterious Institute is taking people and replacing them with these lifelike synths, similar to the replicants from Blade Runner. So, who is real? Who's a synth plant? Can you trust anyone? While I love the setup of Fallout 4 from a narrative perspective, it is a little limiting from an RPG perspective. If you play the male character, you are a war veteran. If you play the female character, you are a lawyer. You don't get to choose the backstory of your character. Regardless, once Fallout 4 opens up after the tutorial, the player will find a marvelous open-world sandbox to play around in. Joined by Dogmeat, your trusty but mangy sidekick, you'll set out into this massive open world that is like no other in gaming. No matter how you build your character, you get to choose whether the Railroad, the Minutemen, the Institute, or the Brotherhood of Steel comes out on top. My only real complaint is that the main story just is not very good. Although, excellent side quests like the Cabot House, the USS Constitution, and the Silver Shroud sure help a lot. Fallout 4 gets flack from some fans due to its removal of some of the RPG elements. I cannot disagree that Fallout 4 is much more of an open-world survival shooter than it is an RPG, with the main difference just being that your stat build barely matters. Regardless of how your character is built, you can potentially reach any of the 4 endings, finish any quest, and collect every weapon some way or another with any build. While this is very welcoming to players new to RPGs, it also kind of dilutes the fun of personalized builds, and it sadly removes the satisfaction of specialized dialogue with skill checks. Luckily, Fallout 4 compensates by providing excellent shooting, ultra-moddable guns, armor, and ammo, great settlement building, and hardcore survival mechanics that make the wasteland feel truly dangerous for the first time. A wealth of terrifying new monsters inhabit a living world, where the universe keeps on moving even when you're not there. For instance, you might come across a dead radstag on the road because a Deathclaw killed it when you were halfway across the map and left it there. Fallout 4 is strange because even though it doesn't feel like your choices are altering the world as much as they did in previous games, the world does keep moving. It's just moving despite you, not because of you. This is a huge loss of control for a player coming from the previous game to this one, and it is pretty intentional. Fallout 4 is themed around the destruction of the old world and the creation of the new world from its parts. It fits in nicely with the settlement building part, which I've spent hundreds of hours doing, and it is very much an entry-level RPG, but you got excellent voice acting, memorable characters, great shooting, like I said, hundreds of fully realized locations, and unforgettable wasteland creatures, so it ends up being a really exciting adventure nonetheless. But the real treat of Fallout 4 is in its DLC, particularly Far Harbor, and Nuka World to a degree. Far Harbor is an overhaul of the entire game that takes place on a new landmass about a third the size of the original map, with new ghoulish monsters, the return of skill checks and dialogue, quests that are locked off by stat builds, 3 factions that actually change and react to your decisions, and the best written quests in the game. Far Harbor is basically what fans imagined when they thought about a next-gen Fallout game. Far Harbor is unquestionably the best thing that Bethesda Game Studios has ever produced, in my opinion. Make sure you get the Game of the Year edition with all the DLC when you go in on Fallout 4. I probably don't need to recount for you the legendary launch failure of Fallout 76. Plagued with bugs, glitches, and basically bereft of any content, Bethesda's foray into multiplayer was nothing short of a disaster. Fast forward to 2023, and Fallout 76 is not only fixed, it's actually great. For a deep dive into how it's changed over the years, you can check out my write-up from a few months ago, which I've linked down in the description. When I spent around 20 hours on the launch version, I did not think Fallout 76 was a salvageable game. Looking back now, spending the next few years rebuilding it from the ground up to save the Fallout brand's value was the right thing to do. So what is the game now? Fallout 76 is what Bethesda jokingly calls a minuscule multiplayer online RPG, and there's not really a better description of what it is. When you're starting a new game, you'll load into a world that you're sharing with just 20 other players on a map that is 4 times the size of Fallout 4. This means that you can, and likely will, play Fallout 76 for 3 or 4 hours at a time without ever running into another human player. In fact, when you do, it's kind of a little event. Typically, other human players will just wave and continue whatever they were doing, but sometimes a high-level player will stop and drop free loot for you to welcome you into post-apocalyptic West Virginia. Besides being multiplayer, Fallout 76 is so unlike its predecessors in a major way. It is a luscious green world where nature has reclaimed the land. No one dropped a bomb on West Virginia, because why would they? So it simply isn't destroyed in this world, it's just empty. Fallout 76 takes place 25 years after the bombs dropped, so the world is full of NPCs who remember the pre-apocalypse and technology from the bygone era. It is also full of monsters that have never been seen before, including many based on American urban legends. We've got the Mothman, the Grafton monster, we've got Zedans, who are aliens, and the half-zombified Scorch, and my favorite, the Honey Beast. But Appalachia is genuinely one of the best maps in video games, and I implore you to explore it. Fallout 76 is hard to explain because it isn't really like anything else that exists. It is a much more hardcore RPG than Fallout 4 was. We've got the return of these intricate dialogue trees, skill checks in dialogue and out, multiple quest solutions, and we got 6 distinct factions with reputation meters. It also transforms your special stats into perk cards, meaning that you can essentially alter your character's abilities at any time. I actually love this change, and sharing perks with friends on the same team kind of rocks. So you can play this game alone and manage to complete the 4 campaigns that are available. Right now that is the Overseer's Quest, Wastelanders, Steel Dawn, and Steel Rain. But for high-level events and other special stuff, you absolutely need to squad up. The writing in Fallout 76 is actually excellent, and dialogue and characters rival that of New Vegas. I'm not going to harp on it too long, but Fallout 76 is a hell of a lot of fun now. The base building mechanics are much better and allow you to have a more permanent home in an ever-changing world. Plus, there is no PvP combat. This is a purely co-op adventure. So you don't have to worry about like Waluigi Buttmuncher 69 griefing you and ruining your quest line. More likely, he is crouching and hopping around your camp dropping tomatoes for reasons known only to him. While Fallout 76 is definitely still my least favorite of the Bethesda games, it is actually excellent now and well worth your time. The microtransactions are actually not in your face, and they're pretty much all cosmetic. And there's plenty of story content to keep you busy before you start getting to events and raids and expeditions. You should also note that all expansions are free, so everyone is playing the exact same content all the time. Give it a run on Xbox Game Pass, or PlayStation, or Steam. It's a good game for good people. Everyone's very nice. Give it a go. I will go ahead and save you some heartbreak. I think the only Fallout spin-off game that is worth your time is Fallout Shelter, which is available on Steam, Android, and iOS. It's a comfy little city builder management kind of game that's free to play, and for me, I can get a good stretch of like 15 hours out of it before I have to start paying for microtransactions. It's cute, it's low stress, so I recommend giving it a shot. Then we've got Fallout Tactics, which is fine, and I can see how some enjoyed it, but Fallout Brotherhood of Steel is a miserable piece of software that I cannot believe Black Isle Studios allowed to happen. Do not engage with that one. If you're interested in exploring the universe in other ways, there's actually a great minifig war game called Wasteland Warfare. There's the fun but overly complex Fallout the board game, which I have, and is complicated. But we've also got an official tabletop RPG. It's just called Fallout the role-playing game. Well, there you have it. So that's pretty much as succinct a summary of the Fallout universe and all it has to offer that I can provide you. The Fallout license has kind of been through the ringer. Nearly every game has been developed by a different team, but I think that's what makes it so special. I recommend beginning with Fallout 3, and then going to New Vegas, and then Fallout 4, and then heading back to the first 2. And, definitely give 76 a try while you're at it. I know because it's multiplayer, it won't be for everyone, but it's worth checking out. War might never change, but you are about to see America in a brand new way that brings the cracks in our society to the forefront while retaining that unbreakable American spirit. Welcome home. Na, na.